Hi, my name is Alex, aka Liquid Verve, and today we are discussing a portrait retouching workflow that is centered around dodge and burn. This tutorial is for anyone looking to learn dodge and burn based retouching from scratch, as well as for those who have been dodging and burning for a while and are looking to upgrade and optimize their workflow quality or efficiency. I would highly recommend coming in here with at least a base knowledge of Photoshop. If you're new to Photoshop, I would suggest familiarizing yourself with the software first and then coming back to this tutorial. I'd recommend at least understanding the interface, using adjustment layers and layer masks, as well as using the base tools such as the paintbrush and the eraser. Okay, let's take a look at the table of contents for the tutorial today. This tutorial is split into three main sections. We have the theory first, and then we have two start-to-finish retouching walkthroughs. The theory section will start out by us defining a couple of important terms. Then we'll go into discussing the foundations of local dodge and burn and how it integrates into a full retouching workflow. Lastly, we'll finish off with some frequently asked questions that will kind of prepare us for going into the practical retouch. The second section is a full start-to-finish, in-depth retouch walkthrough that we'll do in real time on this image of Keep, and her Instagram tag is Keep Chambers. We'll get started in Camera Raw, then move on to Cleanup and Local Dodge and Burn, and then go into Contouring and Skin Color. Lastly, we'll finish off with some stylization and exporting. The third section of the tutorial is another full walkthrough on this image of Katie, and her Instagram tag is Katie McKenzie. I want to show a second example of all the techniques that we're discussing here because they will deviate slightly from image to image depending on the unique challenges that each skin type brings with it. So, in this case, we will be approaching a couple of new challenges with this image, such as maintaining freckle detail, removing little blemishes and some fine lines, and working on a face that is at an angle to the camera. So, one more thing before we get started. If you've seen any of my other tutorials, you will be aware that I have a laundry list of disclaimers at the start of each, and this one's no exception. Meanwhile, if you're new here, welcome. First off, I want to emphasize that I sincerely believe that there is no right or wrong way to edit or retouch. Different things work for different people, and we all develop sort of our own versions of these techniques. So just because I'm taking a certain approach doesn't mean that I'm saying it is the best option or the only option. Make sure to custom tailor all of these techniques to work for your own style and workflow habits. Next, I just want to mention that there are two raw files attached to this tutorial download, one of Keep and one of Katie. These are meant for you to use as you can follow along with the tutorial and apply the steps practically. However, they are only licensed for educational use, so please do not use or post them anywhere, whether commercially or non-commercially. Okay, that's it from my end. I'm excited to get into it. So let's get started by building a foundation and discussing and clarifying a couple of terms because people might have varying definitions of these. The first term I want to address is retouching, and many people define this term differently. For example, some use it interchangeably with editing. When I use the term retouching, I am referring to the correction portion of the workflow. So I am referring to the process of eliminating or diminishing the appearance of inconsistencies that distract us from the beauty of the subject. I like to break this down into 4 types of skin issues that we can correct and or retouch. The first is disruptions, the second is transitions, the third is texture, and the fourth is color. I'll go into more details on these in just a minute. The next term I want to discuss is local dodge and burn. This is also called or also known as corrective dodge and burn. However, I believe in our community, the term local dodge and burn is largely prevalent. Local dodge and burn is a skin retouching technique that evens out the inconsistencies in the luminosity of the skin. For anyone who might be unsure, luminosity refers to brightness and doesn't include color. So what this technique specifically comes down to is brightening areas that are too dark and darkening areas that are too bright, and this evens them out. Dodging refers to brightening, burning refers to darkening. If you're having a hard time remembering this, I would just remember when you burn wood, it turns very dark. The last term I want to define is contouring, and many people refer to this as global dodge and burn. Personally, I find that incredibly confusing. I've had so many people ask me what the difference is between local and global dodge and burn. They are very hard to keep apart. So to eliminate confusion, I'm going to call global dodge and burn as its alternate term contouring for the sake of this tutorial. What this technique refers to is using light and shadow to exaggerate and add additional depth to any element, and that includes the face. We are essentially making brighter areas even brighter and darker areas even darker. And this includes adding definition both on a large scale, so whole shapes in the face, as well as on a small scale, so detailed definition. Once again, dodging refers to brightening and burning refers to darkening. So now that we've defined these terms for the scope of this tutorial, let's go a little bit more in detail on how local dodge and burn works and how it integrates into our workflow. Alright, so far we have established that local dodge and burn is a technique that lightens areas that are too dark and darkens areas that are too light. Now let's break that down and look at an example. Here you can see the dodge, i.e. lightening areas that are too dark, and here you can see the burn, darkening areas that are too light. Now let's put those two together. Okay, so at this point you might say, alright, so this works in black and white, but does it work in color? Yes, it does. So what we perceive as inconsistencies in the skin is actually mostly luminosity inconsistency. We do have a little bit of color inconsistency as well, but we will be tackling that separately. So let's get specific. What kind of issues can we really combat with local dodge and burn? To discuss this, let's go a little bit more in detail on those 4 different types of skin issues that I mentioned a little bit earlier. The first one is disruptions, and by that I mean disruptions in luminosity. These are usually large or medium scale, which means that we can see them from far away, even when we're zoomed out. Disruptions are isolated spots or patches that are too dark or too light to match their surroundings. An example for this would be under-eye patches or indents in the skin that are being brought out by how the light is hitting them. The next one is transitions in luminosity. These are also usually large or medium scale and can either refer to transitions that are too harsh or transitions that are just generally uneven. Both harsh transitions and uneven transitions are caused by the lighting and are thus mostly found around the dimensional features of the face. So for example, we will find these around the cheeks or the cheekbones, around the temples, around the nose, or around the jawline. The next type of issue is texture, and this refers to disruptions or clusters of disruption on a small scale, so usually we have to zoom in to really see them. So this includes, for example, blemishes, pores, skin divots, dry skin, makeup texture, specular highlights, issues with brows or lashes or other stray hairs, all kinds of things. The last kind of issue that we can tackle is unevenness in color, and this really just breaks down into issues with hue and saturation. So now that we have a little bit more clarity in identifying what sort of issues we have, let's choose which tools are most suited to tackle them. First off, we have the disruptions in luminosity at a large or medium scale, and local dodge and burn is perfect for these. Here are a couple of examples. Next up, we have transitions in luminosity, and local dodge and burn is perfect for both softening harsh lines and evening out uneven transitions. Next up, we have texture. Technically, you could approach texture with local dodge and burn. This is how I used to do it, and many others choose to do it that way as well. However, because the detail is so fine and you have to zoom in so far and approach such small-scale changes, you will find yourself with hour-long dodging and burning processes. Meanwhile, the approach that I teach here is keeping all texture work in the cleanup layer and cleaning it up with the healing brush and clone stamp. And this is a vastly more efficient approach and will heavily cut down on your overall workflow time. Okay, so the last type of skin issue that we identified is unevenness in color, both in hue and saturation. And of course, neither local dodge and burn nor the healing brush or clone stamp are well suited for fixing this type of issue. so we are going to be doing this in a separate step with specific color correction tools. Okay, so that's really it. Familiarizing ourselves with these different types of skin issues really helps us quickly identify them and then choose the tool best suited to be able to execute each correction. Let's touch on some frequently asked questions before we begin our retouch. First, how long does local dodge and burn really take? And is it really as complex as it seems? Honestly, it depends on your approach. Local dodge and burn can be a really intimidating technique at first glance. However, it is my objective to make it as manageable as possible for you. My local dodge and burn takes me 10 to 15 minutes on average, but can be done even more quickly than that, to be honest. As I just mentioned a minute ago, I teach an approach that evens out large and mid-scale inconsistencies with local dodge and burn while leaving small-scale detail to the healing brush, or even leaving it intact. Many people zoom in all the way and remove all the small-scale inconsistencies, but that actually often costs us valuable realism. If we want the skin to look like real skin, so basically to look unretouched, the small-scale texture and detail is what we're trying to maintain to keep that realism intact. If, however, we do want the skin to look like porcelain, that's totally fine too. We can remove all the little tiny detail, but honestly, at that point, frequency separation might be a much better approach as it will have similar results and be much more time efficient. We'll talk about comparing the two techniques in a minute. Next question. What sort of hardware do I need for local dodge and burn? I would highly recommend using a tablet, and I know this takes a little bit of time to get used to. It took me a couple of weeks, some people learn within a couple of days. Honestly, just be patient with it as it is a very counterintuitive piece of hardware, but it will vastly cut down on your editing time. I do know some people who dodge and burn with a mouse, but I don't know any of them that can do a full retouch in under an hour, so it's an option, just not the best option. Next question. What tools do we use in Photoshop to create the dodge and burn effect? With this approach, we use two curves. One is raised for the dodge and one is lowered for the burn. And the way we do this is that we slowly layer it on with a low flow brush, which means we can perfectly dose the amount of lightening or darkening. The advantage the curves method has over using other tools is that we can use the mask view for all kinds of convenience. For example, visibility of our adjustments, or modifying or erasing parts of the adjustment very deliberately. Now, if you're wondering if you can dodge and burn in Lightroom, yes, actually you can. Although it is a little clunky as we don't have as sophisticated of a mask view, but it is possible. And I've actually done this a lot, specifically in Lightroom Mobile on the go on my mobile phone. So the way to approach it in Lightroom would be to use the adjustment brush and create one adjustment as a dodge and raise the exposure, and create one adjustment as the burn and lower the exposure. And then both of these adjustments can be painted on with a low flow brush. Next question. How long will it take to learn local dodge and burn? Honestly, it's a little bit different for everyone, but generally I would say please be patient with it. It is a pretty challenging technique. And, although some people might pick it up in a couple of days or weeks, some people might take a couple of months. Personally, it took me a couple of weeks of daily practice to learn to dodge and burn effectively and smoothly, and a few months to really become confident. So really, take your time. Last question. What are the core differences between local dodge and burn and frequency separation? And why should we choose local dodge and burn over frequency separation? I think many of us are probably coming into learning local dodge and burn from using frequency separation. On the other hand, if local dodge and burn is the first retouching technique you're studying, that's totally okay too. Let's discuss the benefits that local dodge and burn has over frequency separation. The first is general structural integrity. Frequency separation requires for us to move, mix, and blur areas, which can cost structural integrity of the face and thus be considered more destructive. Meanwhile, with local dodge and burn, we are only lightening or darkening, which is much more gentle and sort of non-invasive on the shapes and textures of the face. The next benefit is control. In frequency separation, we kind of blend everything at once. large and mid-scale unevenness, and luminosity and color. Local Dodge and Burn offers us much more flexibility and control in choosing exactly which issues to tackle without inherently affecting other situations. Also, by not blending colors at the same time as luminosity, we can control exactly what we want to color correct and what we want to maintain, so that we have the opportunity to keep full color variability wherever we want. And color variability is something that I'll discuss in detail in a minute. All you should know for now in this regard is that color variability is a huge contributing factor in maintaining natural-looking skin. The next benefit that local Dodge and Burn has over frequency separation is capability in regards to certain skin issues. Frequency separation is limited in regards to solving certain problems, such as larger disruptions and transitions, for example, under-eye circles. Local Dodge and Burn, on the other hand, can solve these problems extremely effectively and quickly. The last benefit Local Dodge and Burn has is that it works with non-destructive layers. Frequency separation is a destructive part of the workflow, which means that you have to merge all layers that you previously had to be able to apply this adjustment. So that means you can't really go back and make changes to the underlying layers later. Local Dodge and Burn, on the other hand, is a non-destructive process as it works via adjustment layers so that you can make changes underneath, even to a certain degree on the skin that you are local dodging and burning. So that sums up all the benefits that local Dodge and Burn has over frequency separation. Now, people do say that the major advantage of frequency separation is workflow efficiency. Many people consider it to be a much quicker approach than local Dodge and Burn. I would like to challenge that and argue that if we take an efficient approach to local Dodge and Burn, we can almost match the workflow time of a professional frequency separation retouch. Honestly, frequency separation definitely has its place. Personally, I use it a ton, mostly on fabrics and other environmental surfaces, and also sometimes exposed skin outside the face, so the neck or the shoulders, the arms, the legs, anywhere around the body. If and when doing frequency separation, I would highly recommend studying Dani Batista's mixer brush technique, which is the most controlled and high-end frequency separation technique that I'm aware of. Alright, that concludes the frequently asked questions. Now that we have a solid foundation of understanding the basics of this workflow, let's get started and actually jump into our retouch.